Welcome back. Hello, everybody. Lydia.
I'm Finn.
And our special guest today, Loretta Kennedy. I am so excited to have Loretta on the podcast. I've known of Loretta and met Loretta for about, 4 years. I want to say 4 or 5 years in lots of different guises. And yeah, I'm so excited that she's agreed to come on the podcast. Loretta is a multi-passionate entrepreneur and coach. And today she is here to talk to us about money and the toxicity around money and our emotional attachment to money and all of that kind of stuff that makes most of us kind of go, oh. And yeah, for me, certainly this is a time, and I think for lots of us, this is a time when a podcast like this is so needed, because coming off the back of the last 2 years, lots of us have found ourselves in slightly squirmy places, or everything has changed, and whether that's a better place or a worse place, our attitudes around money, our attachments to money, and our emotions around money, they're deeply complex, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you both so much for having me on your podcast. I'm delighted to be speaking into this topic, really, because it's huge. And as you already said, it's so multi-layered, it's so complex, and every single one of us has something when it comes to our relationship with money. Whether, it's something we've inherited from our ancestors or something that we've had in our own lived experience, we all carry something. We all have something, because money is such a complex, it's such a complex, intangible thing, and when we talk about money, it's really important to, it's one of the things I suppose that I have learned myself. So I went off and I studied about money because so much was coming up for me in relation to how I was running my businesses. And I found that I kept encountering these behaviors and recognizing these behaviors in myself. And there came a point where I just thought, I have to go into this. I actually have to really do the work here, because nothing is moving here. Everything is really, really stagnant. And I know that there's something really, really deep here, because my head is telling me to do one thing, but my body, my nervous system is just terrified. So that's what led me down the route of studying in the Trauma of Money program. So it's a really beautiful program. Yeah.
And what sort of behaviors are you talking about, to make it really specific for people? Like what are the sort of examples in your own experience? What are the sort of behaviors that were toxic that you recognize that you needed to address?
So things like having a lack mentality, or a lack mindset, a scarcity mindset. I mean, my food business was making money, and I was still too afraid to take a salary for myself. Though there was money in the bank account, though there was a consistent, steady stream of income coming in, my nervous system just had this unexplained fear that the bottom was going to fall out of everything, and that, I just couldn't do that. Also, I hadn't really had that been modeled to me beforehand. I mean, I went to college, I did that usual route. I mean, I was born in the 70s, so I remember recessions. I remember my parents speaking about like deep recessions. There was a lot of immigration in Ireland at the time. I mean, I remember when, women couldn't work in the public service in Ireland. That's recent memory. So for me, starting my own business, it triggered so much in me around my relationship with money and what I could and couldn't do with money, and also in my own self-belief around being able to generate income for myself that wasn't dependent on somebody else paying me. So it went very, very deep. It went very deep. I mean, other instances where I was afraid to invest in my business. I remember once, and I first came up against it, I had one ingredient to buy and I could no longer buy it. I couldn't buy it in like a little 5-kilogram bag. I had to spend €800 on this one ingredient. And I went into something which is called all or nothing thinking. When you're in scarcity, like your body just goes into this space of, I only have 2 options, and that is either buy the ingredient or shut the company down. I couldn't.
So it's like you're at the roulette wheel and you've got the black and the white, and you're like, okay,
that's it.
Everything on black.
No other options. So that's when you're in the real tunneling, the real you don't see the other options. You don't see the bigger picture. You're literally in the trenches, in the tunnel. So there was a lot of that coming up for me, a lot of fear, a lot of also, I mean, when we speak about money and, you know, a trauma response say to money, many of us think about trauma as like big T trauma, so catastrophic events that have happened that have really changed your life. But we also have the small T traumas, and these are the things that are, you know, they say big T is explosive and small T is erosive. So it's the small T traumas of maybe growing up and you were the child on the street that didn't get the best clothes or the new clothes or get to go on holidays or got the hand-me-downs. Maybe you didn't have like the two quid for chips on a Friday and all your friends did. It's that kind of stuff that just builds up and builds up and builds up. And then you carry that with you as an adult into this feeling and this deep belief that actually, you know, you're never going to have that money and you have to work really, really hard. So I would have had a really strong work ethic in me as well. And part of me really couldn't understand where this almost workaholism was coming from. I was still broke, but I was working and working and working in that real hustle kind of a space as well. So a lot of different things were coming up for me that I think probably a lot of people can identify with as well, because they're really common. Yeah.
So when you say hustle, it's really interesting because it does elicit a lot of our ideas around kind of the American dream and this idea that hustling is what gets you there. That it's sort of, and I had a conversation with my family last night that I found particularly triggering around this, the idea that we have to be hustling, that somebody else has to lose for us to win. And I feel like that for me is one of the biggest problems around what I see in the macroeconomic kind of space, that this like general idea that the free market has not just no boundaries in terms of like, you know, we're not living in like Maoist, socialist, whatever republic, but it has no boundaries in terms of like our actual ethics or responsibility. So that everyone goes out there with terrifying fear that like, that guy just wants my money, essentially. And I just have to like do the hustle as hard as I can so that I get to have my portion of the pie. And it's like a fight, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the piece as well around like what's the deeper piece around that, like where is the fear really, really coming from? So, you know, there so many different things come up here for me personally, in relation to the workaholism. It was this feeling that there was always something kind of chomping at my heels, and that, you know, there would never be enough, you know, that there was, didn't almost have permission to rest, that there wasn't this permission to really, I mean, if I had a gap, say, in my day, I would be looking to fill it with work related things. And then when I became self-employed and started working for myself, that just got so magnified.
It's like taking the genie out of the bottle.
I was like,
if
oh
you're
my
workaholic and then you
God.
become self-employed, forget it.
And it's like, there's nobody to tell me now, like what hours to work. So I'm just like, whoa, like, what do I do here with this, like really like marshmallowy kind of time place that I'm in?
Not as joyful as marshmallow, I might say though.
No, not as joyful,
Not
but
as tasty.
it's just that
Where's the
real
hot?
kind of like, everything feeling really, really different, being in a very, very different space. And like what you're speaking about as well there, Finn, it's, you know, that whole piece around, well, if that person has, you know, it feeds into this idea that money is finite. And we know money is infinite. Money is man-made. It is infinite. I mean, you can just continue to print money for as long as you want. I mean, I know there are regulations in place, but theoretically, money is infinite. And we have infinite ways of making money. And I mean, with different currencies, I mean, there's so many different financial products out there now. But we've been brought up, or we've grown up with this idea that it is finite, that there's only a certain amount of it. And if one person gets a bigger slice of the pie, that means there's less for me. So we've been trained to be in deficit. We've been trained to always be in lack, even if we have £1 million in the bank, even if we have a fridge that is full, even if we have, you know, all of our bills paid for, if we are still in lack and believing that other person has one up on us, our whole system will be in lack. Chemically, our brain will go into lack. Our behaviors will operate from a place of lack. We'll go into that all or nothing and that tunneling type of decision making as well. So we go into the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. We go into a traumatic response, which is what a lot of us are in a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to talk about self-employed. Obviously, like the three of us are self-employed. I think almost all of my friends are self-employed, creatives in some kind of a way, and my parents were too. Um, it's interesting because when we talk about like worth as well, in terms of like lack and like, there's no one to tell you like how much to work, but there's also no one to tell you how much to charge for your business and how much you're worth. There's no one giving you a bonus at Christmas time or giving you a raise. There's no one telling you like after 6 months, if your performance is this good, you will get this thing, or your job that you've gone to university is worth this amount and you're a lawyer, so you're going to make this amount. There's just you out there in your own, and you're naturally pitting yourself against other people to go, well, am I getting more clients than them or less, so then I should maybe have more than this, or I've been doing it for this amount long. And so you naturally go into this comparative thing, and then it all gets tied up in worth, and then you're still having to define your worth by the money that you're choosing to put on the thing. And for me, and certainly from what I hear from all my friends who are in this space as well, then that lack and that wealth get mixed up together, and then it just becomes so murky to even know how to disentangle that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really beautiful tool that I was introduced to. It's called the window of resilience. So he's a financial psychologist, Dr. Dan Sigal, introduced this, and it's abbreviated to the WOR, the WOR. So when you're talking about that real, where we can go into the comparisonitis, when we can actually just, wake up feeling like I have loads to offer and I'm really good at my pricing and I feel really, really solid in who I am today. And then 2 minutes on social media, you're like, oh my God, like I'm a wreck. I'm such a disgrace. I'm an absolute failure, even recognizing that, like that's one thing, but when our body still holds on, when our nervous system still holds on to this feeling of inadequacy, it's very, very difficult when there is that dissonance there, where you're telling your head is saying, but no, like you've got, your pricing is good and you made this amount of money and all of that, but your nervous system is still really dysregulated. So the window of resilience is a really beautiful tool you can use, because a lot of the time I find with clients and also with myself, I'm not always sure where I am on that line. So basically it goes from 0 to 10, and you can put this in the show notes as well so people can actually have a look at this. And what they have discovered is that anything between, say, a 5, 6, 7 is a really good place for you to be, for your nervous system to make a good decision and to actually feel like you're back in your own body. What we find when people are hyper aroused is that distractiveness can kick in, that jangliness, the dissociation, where you actually you're not in your own body and you're not feeling safe to be with yourself. So a lot of the work is around how do you bring yourself back into that middle ground, where you are anchored, where you are feeling really, really solid. The other extreme of that is, the 1, 2, or 3. And when you're on that end of the scale, just like that freeze response, it's the freeze trauma response. And a lot of people would have that as well, where you're just like frozen into inaction because everybody else is so brilliant and I'm just really shit. And what's the point? So it's about like, what are the different things that you can do? What are the different techniques or the different modalities that you use to bring yourself back into that really lovely sweet spot where you are feeling good about yourself, but also where there's that dissonance doesn't exist between your mind and your body. And I think comparison is huge. It is absolutely huge. And pricing, there's so much energy in pricing, and especially being self-employed, especially if you're offering a service, if you're a service based practitioner. It's one thing selling a product, like a physical product, because, you can do the calculation of how much it costs and build in your margin and all of that and your distribution. And then there's a cost and a charge. But when it's you yourself as well, when you're the one delivering the service, there's no thin film between you and the person who you're delivering it to. So oftentimes what I'll find is so for people who are money avoiders, typically how that shows up is that if somebody comes to you and says, I really want to work with you, can you tell me how much it is to do one of your classes? Somebody who's a money avoider will typically say, do you know what, I'll email you because they're afraid to speak it, or they just can't get the words out because they're not comfortable with speaking about money, or they're not comfortable with naming their price, or they just may never get back to that person again. So it's that whole thing where we're calling in abundance, we're doing all the affirmations, and it's all up here. And then when you really look at it, like, how am I with abundance? How am I when those clients start calling and start emailing me? You know, how am I with overflow? Can I hold it? Can I contain it? Can I actually meet them and have that adult to adult conversation with people?
One of the things we're seeing a lot of at the moment, both of us, in fact, are having a lot of conversations with people who pre-pandemic were really living their passion, and they were trying to pursue something that was, you know, based on purpose and like was a real mission to them, and they seemed to identify it, and they were living it, they were happy in it, and it was still difficult. They were usually self-employed in roles like teaching yoga or those types of kind of disciplines where you're really going it on your own. And a lot of those people that we've come across lately are slipping back. Well, I would say slipping back, but let's say moving back, to be fair, for whatever reason, to roles within like old roles they used to do. Like they used to be marketing analysts, or they used to be financial analysts, or so that I'm seeing so much of that at the moment. Like, how, if we're somebody who, and we are as attached to our mission as we are, and we're seeing all the financial reasons why those people are moving out of this very unsafe space, or what can feel like a very unsafe space, where you're really authoring your own thing and you're responsible for it, and the bottom line lands with you, and the book stops you, and that sort of stuff, and you're seeing actually money not coming in the same way as it was. How can you try to self-check before jumping off that, what feels like or can feel like a sinking ship?
Oh yeah, great. And like there are a couple of different tools you can use there. So I mean, one really beautiful one is HALT, HALT. So it's used with I think Alcoholics Anonymous use it. So H being, you know, not to make a decision, not to jump to make a decision when you're feeling very triggered, or when your nervous system is really, really triggered. So if you're hungry, if you're angry, if you're lonely, or if you're tired, and these could be some of those classical reasons why people make an immediate decision or jump into something. The other piece is to really check in with what's going on with your body, what's going on with your nervous system, and where are you feeling it. So to notice if you're dissociating, to notice if your heart rate is accelerating, to notice if you're absolutely just totally flat and you just don't want to look at it, you don't want to engage with a financial advisor, you don't want to look at any other means of bringing in income. And then to try and bring yourself into a place where you make a discerning decision. And the decision might still be that you go back to your old job and you timeline it, or you do both. I actually heard a woman who speaks a lot about financial literacy. She spoke, she used the term an angel investor in a way I've never heard it used before. And she said, you know, can you view your 9 to 5 as an angel investor for a fixed period of time? If that's what you need for your nervous system to feel regulated, if that's what you need to feed your family and pay your mortgage, like maybe that's what you need to do. And I agree with that. I mean, and I can only speak from my own experience, you know, which was I had such a lack mentality. I wouldn't even give up my day job, you know, knowing that I had money for a salary. So sometimes I really feel like we do need to do what is good and right for us, but to also to be able to timeline it, because we all know that the years can just slip into years, into years, into years. So we're in very, I suppose, strange circumstances at the moment. I'm seeing a lot of people leaving institutions like healthcare, like education, and going off to become self-employed. So it's interesting. I'm seeing this in the post-pandemic, where I'm seeing a lot of nurses leaving nursing. I'm seeing a lot of psychiatrists leaving psychiatry, and teachers who have just really, you know, had enough really at this point, and are choosing to really go in search of, you know, what their true purpose is, or whatever that archetype might be that they have, to really I suppose, expand on it and turn the volume up on it for themselves in their own way, in their own unique way. So I think post-pandemic, we're seeing so much movement. And ultimately, we are the only people who know what's good for us. We're the only people who know what our own unique set of circumstances are. And I'm definitely not somebody who would tell anyone who has a mortgage and children and food to put on the table, oh, just give up your day job and the universe will support you, because, you know, I didn't do that. So, but I am seeing, it's interesting, I'm seeing quite a lot of people leaving their 9-to-5s and going off and doing their own thing. Now, a lot of those people would have financial savings, they would have done their figures. It wasn't a rash decision. Again, this isn't like just a reactive decision. This is like you've thought it through. You've made your decision from a place of being very regulated and knowing exactly how much money you need, and, you know, having engaged with that piece as well. Because I do find, particularly if you've had, say, like a bad experience in school with maths, or if you were told that you were just really shit at maths, or, you know, that you were shit with numbers, I see a lot of people carrying that through as well to adulthood. And typically that shows up as, and I work a lot with women, so that shows up a lot as women like kind of delegating the financial stuff to their husbands, the insurance, the you know, the mortgage providers, that kind of stuff, and really not feeling confident enough to make like a big decision without kind of consulting on it. So there's a big piece there as well. There's a really big piece there.
And Loretta, you said, you know, I'm not one to say, oh, you know, just give up your job and the universe will provide. I was listening to a podcast this morning about the feng shui of money and how to feng shui your house in terms of money, and just like interesting, kind of finding out more things. Do you believe that there is a manifesting that can bring money into your life, into your mindset, into your whole environment, or do you believe that it's more tangible, like you have to do steps and this is the way it is?
No, I do. I mean, right beside me here, I have my vision board, and I have 3 different things written on my vision board that I have been manifesting for the past 2 years. And 2 of those have come to fruition. And I'm kind of getting the kind of the final sign off on one of those this month. So I absolutely do. I absolutely do, Lydia. And for me, the key piece is it's that emotional frequency as well. So when we're in lack, we do not see the options available to us. We are operating from a much lower frequency. Usually it's pain or shame. You know, we're not open to seeing what else is happening out there in the world. Okay. When we raise that frequency, if we are going to a place of gratitude, particularly, and I'm huge into my journaling, I'm huge into writing out, you know, my I am statements. I am, you know, and I find that a very powerful practice, a very, very powerful practice. And it's not a head intellect practice, it's a full body practice. And it's the piece around really feeling.
Can I pause you, Loretta? Can you go into that a little bit, just for what does that
Sure.
mean, the I am practice?
Sure.
What does that look like?
So what I generally, and it's a practice that I've used myself over the years. So it's just a very basic but very beautiful gratitude practice, and the consistency is really key. And for me, what I had been doing initially was I am grateful for this, and I'm grateful for this, but it was just like really rattling it off. There wasn't the full emotional connection with what I was truly grateful for. It was nearly something I was just ticking off to get done in the morning. So what I've started to do now is I write in the present tense what I'm grateful for, and I write in the future tense what I'm grateful for as if I have it already. And I allow my body to really experience what that will feel like, or what that feels like. Okay. So, this one thing that I have been manifesting for 2 years, I completely let my body feel into what that would feel like when I had it, when I had achieved it. And I checked myself for any dissonance in my body. Okay, to see if there was anything around my solar plexus, if there was anything that was just niggly there that I knew was actually going to self-sabotage me from actually allowing that to happen when the opportunity presented. So it put me in a space of my body recognized how beautiful and how safe this would feel. Okay. And then when the opportunities to actually take action on it, I was more inclined to actually go and follow up on stuff and to actually put myself out there, because I was so much more receptive to it. So I initiated emails, I followed up with emails from a place of pure potentiality, and also feeling like that I was worthy of receiving this. So it was a very different energy that I brought to it, instead of this, like, I'm calling this in. And then when it arrives, that my body, my nervous system isn't actually ready to deal with all of the work that will actually go with that. It's typically people saying, I want 20 new clients this month. And that's their head telling them they need 20 new clients because they need to pay this bill. Then the 20 new clients come in and they realize, well, I don't have a payment system set up. I've no, Stripe isn't linked. The kids are off on summer holidays. So actually I don't have capacity to take this number of clients. So, it doesn't happen because there isn't the piece there. But absolutely, I feel like gratitude is huge, because gratitude takes us out of this tunneling that we're often in when we're in lack and scarcity, because our beautiful brain can't differentiate between like truly being in scarcity or just believing or thinking that you're in scarcity. So, the brain can't differentiate. So if you have that million quid in the bank, but you still believe you're in scarcity, you are not going to see the bigger picture. You are not going to feel the gratitude. You are not going to feel the love, the joy. You're not going to be able to allow a sunset to experience the sunset and to really drink it in and hold it for yourself. You're going to be really quick to share that or get that out of your system. Another way that this shows up is if, say, for instance, if you had money in your bank account at the end of the month, and you're not used to having money in your bank account at the end of the month. So for somebody who has real difficulty with holding overflow or abundance, they will find a way to get rid of that money. They will find a way to put themselves back into the deficit, to put themselves back into the strive, to put themselves back into the have to always be chasing the thing, okay? Because it's unfamiliar to be sitting there with money in the bank, kind of going, oh my God, like, what do I do now? There's money and I don't have to work right now. And this feels really dysregulating. I'm just going to spend it so I can go back into my old cycle.
That's very interesting.
So,
and what you said there about not being able to sit with the sunset and sharing it too quickly, as you said, sharing. Yeah, I think that is a really interesting thing, because you look at people like 50,000 people at a concert and they've all got their phones up. And it's this idea, maybe that's the thing that's happening. They're living through their phone vicariously because they can't actually experience the joy of actually just being there. That's just too much. They don't feel like they're allowed. They can't give themselves permission to actually just be in the moment. It's amazing because that happens at nearly every concert. That would suggest that basically everybody is in that situation.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, and anytime I say to people do have this moment of, oh my God, yeah, like or the last time that you've had a really good idea, or this great brainwave that you've had for this new app, we all get those, yeah. And like, how quick do you allow yourself to sit with that and to hold it and to really enjoy that, or are you really, really quick to run off and share it with somebody? But it's like the pleasurable experiences, like the sunset, like just waking up and feeling something really beautiful, or like a hug from your child. Do you really allow it? Do you really allow it in, and to kind of be in that overflow? And a lot of us don't. We're not comfortable with it. We find a way to get rid of the pleasurable feelings, or because we're so conditioned to always being in lack,
Yeah.
And you said earlier, you touched on it just slightly, and maybe it was before we started talking about like the trauma, the ancestral trauma of money, and like where we hold that trauma in ourselves. So this isn't even like this lifetime's trauma, maybe it's inherited trauma. Can you talk a little into that?
Yeah. So the role of epigenetics has been really identified as being it's huge actually when it comes to any kind of trauma, and also with money. So I was very lucky. I was part of an international cohort in the Trauma of Money program that I was on, and like hearing and listening to people's stories, of what their ancestors had experienced, and what had actually kind of washed down the line to them, really helped a lot of people to really make sense of why they were the way they were. When it came to money. And so much of say our limbic system, it's pre-verbal, it's non-verbal. We hold these, there might not be a story, there might not be words, but there's a feeling, or there's a darkness, or there's an injunction. There's like, you can't have that, and you don't know where it came from. It's important to remember that any belief that we have that doesn't actually serve us, that it's not ours. That's not ours. That's come from somebody else, because we would only have a belief that will actually nurture us as humans. So any belief that we have that actually hurts us or is hurtful to us, or that's not ours. We've inherited that from someone.
Do you think that money has its own energy?
And I think, I'm from the west of Ireland. I have this fascination with the Irish famine, like an absolute fascination. And I don't know where it comes from, but then we did some ancestral tracing, and my people come from like this one particular part of Mayo where my parents now live. Actually, it's, and I didn't grow up there, but they've actually moved back there. And there's a little area called Kennedy as well, which is really close. So there was a Kennedy clan that lived there. But I have a fascination with the famine. And, and for me, I believe that I have something that's passed down through me into on a cellular level that I hold. And that's from my people, but what we also know about epigenetics is that, going forward, we can change what's passed on. So the legacy we leave can be very different as well, that we can change that. But, ultimately it's us then doing that work to break that kind of subconscious behaviors and patterns.
There was a really interesting thing I was reading around, like the studies around epigenetics, and they did a study in cats where they put a cat into a starvation mode, awful thing, and then it had kittens. And that cat, the cats that were put in starvation mode had one less kitten than the other cats, but each generation for 9 generations had one less kitten each generation. So not only did it carry, but it perpetuated and it magnified the effect each generation, like concentrated, which is a terrifying thought around epigenetics. Wow. That we're living with more of what that person experienced than they were living with themselves. We're experiencing more of that trauma. It's actually being magnified, and the resonance that comes down, whatever it is, this crazy bimorphic situation, crazy field that we have, that it actually leaves us with so much residual, more residual than there was in the original act itself.
Wow.
Which I find wild. Do you believe that money carries its own energy?
So I believe money is neutral. Okay. and I believe it's what we project onto money that gives it its charge. So I believe that, and this is something I've been working on myself, because I wouldn't have held this belief beforehand. But for me, my big aha moment, my big reframe was really noting that actually money is infinite. It's man-made, it is actually man-made. There's an infinite supply of it. But we have been conditioned living in, a capitalistic, consumer-driven, post-colonial society, that money is everything. And it, so for me, it's whatever you project onto it, that's what gives it its charge. But there is absolutely an energetic piece there. And going back to what you were speaking about, Lydia, about like, charging for our services and the self-worth piece, like how do you put a value on your worthiness? It's so basic to have to use a currency to do that with, but that is the society we live in. But yeah, what are your feelings? What are your feelings around money?
They've sort of been really evolving for the last, 10, 15 years. I think I didn't really have much of an attachment to the good or bad of money until I was maybe in my 20s. And I started I always has this kind of slightly ethical drive around the world, that I believe that, that there was, the things that were being done with money on a global scale weren't really for the benefit of society, and I understood things maybe innately around it that I put a language on since, maybe in terms of money being siphoned upwards, that sort of thing, that there wasn't that people were being divested of power and money, and it was being used as a surrogate for that, I suppose, from the general populace. And then my dad died when I was in my 20s, and because he passed away when his parents were still alive, when his parents passed away, I gained an inheritance from him that I shouldn't have for another, I don't know, 20, 30 years, who knows, you know, as long as he should have lived. And it was weird because the inheritance that I gained, I had a very strained relationship with that. It was a multi-family kind of thing, a very mixed bag thing with lots of different voices in it, and it hasn't been that straightforward. And I would say it's put strain on relationships, but also the origin of that money itself. I don't know how cozy I am with the origins, and as a result, it's, you know, it's not ill-gotten gains, but it's just like what I was saying at the start. Like, I have this feeling around if the free market exists, that there should be some ethics around how it's manifested, how it metabolizes, you know, and that if it's not, then that I sort of have a feeling like that the money that comes out of that has a charge, holds a charge. And so for me, I feel that that there's a weight of responsibility to do something with that inheritance that has to go in another direction in order to counter that. I feel like that's the opportunity I have anyway, which is great, but I definitely feel like I'm charged with that as well. I feel like that's an actual obligation, as opposed to just like, it's my choice now, you know?
Wow, yeah, that's the piece there around the charge. I mean, how complex is that, and how layered is that? And there's so much to unpack in that. That's not just a deposit into your account. There's
all these people, there's layers, there's generations of epigenetic things like you're talking about as well. Money is like, it just carries so much trauma. That's the problem. It feels like it's very difficult to imagine a society that still has money as money that isn't traumatic. Like, you know, the way you look at not the Aztecs, but what was his name, the emperor, the Mayan emperor, or whatever, the guy who used chocolate as a currency. It feels like we'd actually have to change money to that point, you know, to reimagine it so that people wouldn't hold the ideas around money like we have it. You know, the fact that it's like gold and silver based, it's made like the coins that we had are like things that are necessarily finite resources that we make it from, you know, and that's problematic in itself. And then we move to plastic, and then it's so ethereal that like there's no sensation, like people need a groundedness from it, and that's kind of gone from having that. The lack of tangibility around it is problematic for people. And also then for me, I have this problem around it because I pay people every 2 weeks, and I feel like there's a real issue in that they don't realize that they get paid A, by me, or B, by the customers who come into the shop, because the money just lands in their account in this magic way every 2 weeks. And I feel like that lack of tangibility is also really problematic for it. But if it's tangible, then it's also finite. And it's like, there's so much in it that money is a fascinating topic for me.
Yeah. I remember listening, you did a really brilliant podcast on the mycelial network. I remember that was amazing. And it's something that's taught actually in the trauma of money, around like money and how ideally it should be dispersed. That if we were to look underneath our feet at the forest floor and the mycelial network, how there's this beautiful infinity loop. There's this beautiful figure of 8 that is at play the whole time, where if there's an area of lack, then that can be brought in, and that there's a beautiful flow that keeps everything just going really, really beautifully. And I love that idea. And I mean also how, you know, you, as you said, you know, you have this charge now, you know, Finn, with this money that you have, or you feel this obligation. And you know, like how wonderful as well that you're in that position, you know, that you can actually do something with that, and you can distribute it whichever way you want. But it is that piece when I think it's only when you become self-employed that you realize like what actually goes into the piece around like generating income and generating the money. When you are an employee, it is a very, very different experience, and you don't really know or realize, as you say, like that the customers have actually paid for that piece, or it's the whole economics of how money is broken down is really interesting. I remember doing my first pricing on one of my physical products and being told you need to build in a salary component into that product, and I had never kind of realized that before, you know, and it was like, oh, okay, so I should be putting in like 1 cent towards the salary in every unit, and I was like, oh my God, this is really fascinating how this all works. It is endlessly fascinating, but also very, very complex. And
yeah, Loretta, how do so like if people are listening and they're like us and they have whatever issues that they have around money, how do they go around solving that? Like, do they come to you and they work with you one-to-one? Do you give them resources? Is there like a course that you have? Like, how can people go, okay, yes, I admit, hands up, I've got a problem. Like, how do I fix this problem?
Okay, so there are a couple of things, and the first thing that I always say is that where we are now, where any of us are now, it is, the result of choices and experiences and things that have happened in our past, either our own lived past or somebody else's past, our great-grandmothers, our great-grandfathers' past. So where we are at now, it is that kind of that backwash, okay? And where we are at now, this is now the going forward piece. So what do you do with it now? So it doesn't always have to be like this, or it doesn't always have to feel like this. Even, the sunset, is there a point where you can actually allow that sunset and just sit with it and drink it into your bones and really enjoy it and not tell anyone else that you've even experienced it? Just hold that for yourself. So the first piece is, and I love having a framework to hang things on. For me, particularly with the traumatic piece around money, so much of it's nonverbal. It's just a feeling, a felt sense. So there's a really great resource. It's a Clont's money script. So there are several money scripts, and generally every one of us, we're usually a combination of 2 or 3 different money scripts. So you've got the money avoider, the money worshipper, you've got, there's a couple of different ones, but I'll link that resource there, and you can go on and do the quiz yourself. It's free, and it just generates then kind of your personality type, okay? And for a lot of people, that's where you'll have your initial aha moment of, oh my God, that's me. That's so me. I'm the money avoider. I don't look at my bank statements. I don't want to know I don't even know how much money I have in my bank account at the moment. It's all mental arithmetic. There's nothing solid. So that's the money avoider. So that's a really great starting place. I also have a 5-week online program. Now I ran it live for the first time. I will be running it live again, perhaps in October. But there is an online version available now, and that's on my website, and I can link that as well. So it's 5 weeks. There's some beautiful somatic practices in there as well to help with regulation. There's some really beautiful practices as well if for anyone who might find that they're really dissociating or feeling that urgency around making like really reactive decisions. And then there's a lot of frameworks in there as well. So it's the combination of both, really. There's the healing piece, there's the compassionate piece, there's also the understanding piece, and then there's the piece of, well, what do I do next? It's great to understand it, but like, well, how do I actually do something then when in real time stuff is coming up for me and I'm falling back on my old ways and patterns? And I will be doing one-to-one work with people as well, but probably not again until October. I'm taking some time off this summer because I've been doing a lot of studying. And for me, like this is the first summer I've actually really taken off. And my nervous system, even like 2-3 weeks ago, was going, oh, you need to be filling in this time with some work. And, I had to really work through that myself to be like, no, it's okay. Like almost speaking to a younger part of me that was feeling really dysregulated and just saying, it's okay, the figures are okay, and I'm going to take some time with the kids, and it's all right. I have permission to rest. So so those are the three different ways. Yeah.
And if somebody's doing really, really well with money and their grant, there are a lot of Porsche Taycans driving down the road these days around Rathmines, and they've never thought about this stuff. Does everybody need to engage with it? Like, what if things are just fine and it's okay?
So the title of my program is called Legacy. And for me, legacy is 2 ways. So legacy is what we've all inherited, the legacy we've inherited, but also what's the legacy you're going to leave after you. So I really do believe in social impact. I really do believe in, if you are part of that mycelium network and you've got a stash of something there, and maybe those trees or saplings over there don't have as much, perhaps there's a way that you could actually maybe redistribute that a little bit more. I think it's always worth really looking at, you know, our legacy isn't necessarily how much money we leave. It's also, you know, our reputation, it's our actions, it's what we did with our time here on this planet. It's like, what is your purpose? What is your true purpose? And how can you make a good and graceful impact on this planet? One of the key laws really is around, again, the law of reciprocity, and that's where the mycelial network comes in. So if we are always taking from the planet, from Mother Earth, if we're always taking, there is going to be something out of whack. There will be something out of whack. It's that beautiful infinity loop again. And if we're overgiving as well, there's going to be something out of whack, because we have to be able to receive if we're giving. If we overgive, we're going to become resentful and burnt out and exhausted. So for that person who is an absolute overflow, I would say really start maybe looking at, you know, or thinking or reflecting on, like, what's your legacy going to be? Because there is a huge piece here around redistribution, I feel.
Yeah, and for those who might not believe in the hereafter, your patterns of what you leave as a legacy will be here after you're gone. It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Whether you believe in God or not, there's a thing there. There's a ripple out effect from whatever you've done. Yeah, so good for you.
Absolutely, with the cellular memory. Yeah, cellular memory.
Yeah, big time. Thank you so much for that. That has been an absolute blessing and a really interesting chance for me to reflect. I'm sure Lydia as well. Yeah, maybe we'd love to have you back on in another few months' time, because we haven't talked about the actual recession. We haven't talked about what's happening in terms of the underlying money currency stuff that's kind of going on at the moment in great detail. And there's so much more we could discuss, right?
I think it would also be really nice to do one. And this is, you know, maybe Loretta doesn't want to do this. I think it would be really nice if, like, we did like a little mini case study guinea pig thing with one of us, where, like, we were talking about our problems and you spoke to us, like, around like how you would deal with that, for people to see, like, now, obviously not to give your time away for free, but for people who are hesitant but are thinking, actually that's something I want to invest in. But say you're someone like me who at the moment is in a place where they don't have very much money, and they're going, I really need this program, but I don't have very much money, so I can't actually even buy the program to solve my money issues, to work with it. You know, to be able to see what that might look like in a micro way might be really useful to help people to feel safe to invest in that.
Oh, that would be amazing. That would be amazing. Yes, and great. You know what, for anyone, I will just say, like, really start with your nervous system. Really start with those little things about, you know, everyone can take a moment to experience and to give and feel gratitude in their day. Absolutely, you can, because immediately once you do that, you're straight away, you're raising your emotional frequency and you're taking your brain out of lack. Okay. And you're just becoming a lot more open to the abundance that actually does exist. It may not be financial, but perhaps it's health, perhaps it's relationships, perhaps it's love, you know. So there's lots of different practices that we can all use as well to just really to nourish our nervous system, because that's the big work. That really is the big work. It's around nervous system regulation.
Perfect. Good point to leave it. Okay, well, listen, thank you very much, Loretta.
Thank you so much, guys. So lovely to see you.
Cheers, same, and best of luck with all of your, like, what you're starting into. It just sounds like a really interesting flow state. Really interesting flow state. I'm very interested to follow it and see where it goes. Thank you everyone for watching as well. And we just like to say thank you briefly to our sponsors, to Clear Light Saunas, who make this possible. If you are somebody who is engaged in or thinking about the idea of getting in a sweaty box a few times a week, and you understand that there's some amazing, powerful health principles behind that. If you're somebody who just like to have that little retreat in your back garden that you can escape from whatever it is in your life for a few hours a week, come and talk to us. We can help you get a discount. And Clear Light are the best people in the world for infrared saunas, absolutely 100% EMF free, etc. Also, thanks to us, we're our own sponsors, goddammit, because you need those these days.
So yeah, we just started our own collection of consciously crafted clothing. It's a little capsule collection, and it's our way of sponsoring ourselves to do this work, so that we're not constantly looking to other people and trying to get sponsorship for ourselves, but also so that we can help to educate around the importance of slow fashion, the importance of sustainability within the fashion industry, and really coming back to one of the tenets that we really believe and that we talk about all the time, that the choices that we make that are best for ourselves are always the choices that are best for the planet, and vice versa. So the clothing that we've made is organic, It's locally printed, it's sustainably sourced, and it's made for people who want to wander. So you can find it on the wanderingintowellnessproject.com,
where you can literally put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, and you
Absolutely.
can help sponsor our podcast and have something too.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so thanks again, and we will see you soon. Thanks, Loretta. Thanks a million. Bye.